Good morning, Weddleton's here.
Morning, John.
All right, who's here? 3 on the phone. Turn buckle, I think. See. Okay, I guess we're about ready to go. Crystal, you want to run the meeting?
I thought well, go ahead, John, because I did last one, so it's your turn.
Okay, I'm happy to do it. I had just I had a lot of questions on aspects of this, so I may be talking a lot, but
Yeah, I think we all do, so yeah.
okay, no, that's
So go
fine.
ahead.
Okay,
Thanks.
so who's here? Mandy's not here. Is Kiana here?
Mr. Weddleton, Desiree's here, and Kiana's here.
Oh, okay. So who wants to do the roll call?
I'll do the roll call for you.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Weddleton.
Here.
Ms. Kennedy.
Here.
Mr. Peterson.
Present.
Mr. Constant.
Here.
Mr. Dunbar.
Here.
Ms. Zalatal.
Here.
And Ms. Quinn Davidson.
Here.
You have a quorum.
All right, thanks. So first item is, well, I guess any changes to the agenda from anyone? Okay, for people listening, we may have a few new people and then some who have listened for a while. What we'll do at the committee is have discussions with staff and assembly members. And if you are on, are people on the phone, can they do, can they raise their hand or put anything in chat?
No, if somebody is calling by telephone, they cannot raise their hand or do the chat function, but at audience participation, they can unmute themselves and speak.
Okay, and okay, so for assembly members and staff, I'll watch the chat for calling on you. And then for people on the phone, after we're done with each of the 2 topics, we'll go ahead and open it up. And then I think you hit *6 and then you can speak. And generally it's not too chaotic. It works okay. Okay, so on this, okay, so no changes to the agenda. We're looking at 2020-93. Is it just someone from staff want to go through this?
Good morning. This is Tom Davis with the Municipal Planning Department. I can briefly walk through that with you and answer any questions. I could give you a brief overview. Am I coming through okay?
Yeah.
Okay, great. We do have a brief handout. I want to have slides that we had some tech issues, and although we didn't get it in time for a handout, I'm wondering if I can share it briefly just to hit the overview.
So you can put it on the screen?
I can, if that is all right with you all. I think I can open it.
Oh, that'd be fine.
It may be that someone may need to give me the ability to do that.
We have professionals in the room. There you go.
So I'll just give a brief background for these technical corrections to Title 21, and then briefly describe them. And then on slide 202, a few points regarding the technical amendments procedure that we're using for these technical amendments. Briefly, on that item 1 under the background on this slide. I'm Tom Davis. I was the project manager for the Our Downtown Step 1 project, which this past spring was a project where we completed the reformat of the existing downtown zoning districts out of the old zoning code book and into the current Title 21. We basically airlifted all the downtown districts and properties into current code with their existing development standards and land use entitlements. That was adopted in April, and since it's become effective on May 28th, we have had there's been some traffic, maybe up to 10 development proposals reviewed through the zoning counter so far, and we are getting more questions in planning by architects, folks who are designing new projects, and it does feel like there is something in the air that there is development investment interest in downtown. So we had a 6-person team on this reformat, and it was a very large formatting change to Title 21. We created a new chapter 21.11 that fit into the current Title 21, which made all the rest of the current Title 21, including its generally applicable provisions, applicable to the downtown. So we had to be very careful about how that current code is interacting with the downtown zones. And because of that, we continue to, and I agree, review that reformatted Title 21, all its chapters, and as well as the Municipal Code of Regulations that follows Title 21. For any kind of inconsistencies, inaccurate section references, unclear terms, because that reformat really involved translating the current into current code. So in the second set, regarding what those technical amendments are, they really are technical corrections, and they really are involved in correcting conflicts in terms or unintended consequences coming out of current Title 21 chapters, 1, Chapter 7, often Chapter 12, and even in the Municipal Code of Regulations that were buried there that are impacting downtown in a way that was not intended in the reformat. Points 5, 6, and 7 hit the highlights. We found, roughly half a dozen of these fixes that are represented in the 7 sections of that ordinance, half a dozen fixes to make. In item 5, several of these technical amendments are really fixing transitional provisions in Chapter 1 of the Title 21 code, where transition dates are referring to the date the rest of the city came into current code back in 2014, 2015. I really need to fix for downtown that those accommodate downtown in there by fixing the dates, which is May 28, 2020. Also, some amortization provisions, amortization deadlines to bring some standard into compliance with current Title 21. That was really intended to give 7 years for existing properties to come into compliance, and its date also is not accommodating downtown, a few other things like that. And item 6, basically, we found buried in the Anchorage Municipal Code of Regulations, that AMCR you see on the slide, that had an outdated procedure from old code that the Title 21 rewrite project, current code, should have taken care of, and it had an outdated procedure by which the Zoning Board of Examiners and Appeals could actually allow unlisted use types into a zone, even though that wasn't listed as an allowed use into the zone. And so there are a couple of things in there that conflicted with current Title 21, but also buried in there was a land use entitlement for downtown that because it was off an AMCR we had missed. And so we're making sure that those conflicts in that land use is taken care of. And then lastly, there are several sections in this ordinance that makes clarifications or clarifies what the definitions are, or fixes references to current Title 21 terms, land use type, categories of zoning districts, current Title 21 terms that were defined under current code in the Title 21 rewrite project that was completed in 2012 that we need to clarify references to from the downtown districts. Just briefly, the last section here, several points about the expedited amendments procedure that we are using. This is a text amendment to Title 21. We are using the expedited amendments procedure, and that's in Title 21. We're using it because while these aren't substantive standards that are changing, these are technical problems that could trip up a development proposal, applicant, a property, a couple of business owners potentially in downtown. We'd like to take care of that now immediately before anything happens. We have brought technical amendments before the assembly previously, and when a development proposal is being impacted, here we're catching them before they happen, and we'd like to do it now. Our downtown step one is step one because of course there are future steps. Our downtown step 3 will amend the downtown districts again once we are completed with updating the downtown plan, which is a project called Our Downtown Step 2. Process to get underway this December or in first quarter of 2021. But we can't wait until we actually come back to amending the downtown zoning district code in Our Downtown Step 3 because just looking at the calendar, by my own estimate, I don't believe that's likely until 2022. So we really do want to take care of this in 2020. So the expedited review and approval procedure that we were using, this is about the 4th or 5th time I think that we've used it. It's in there in order to allow the assembly to make a quick text amendment to Title 21. If there's like point 11, 12 in the slide shows, conflicting provisions, problems, technical issues in the code that are associated with the Title 21 rewrite project, which is the project that of course established current Title 21. And that's what these are. It's really needles in the haystack that we found in often different chapters, current code, that just really did not anticipate or accommodate downtown correctly, or that where the downtown code, downtown chapter, the districts we brought into Title 21 are not interacting correctly yet with a term or a category of use. So under this expedited procedure, a public hearing at Planning and Zoning Commission is not required. We do notify the Planning and Zoning Commission. They do take a look at the amendments that we're proposing and decide whether they want to make any comments to be forwarded to the assembly regarding those expedited amendments. And they did that in August. They found no issues or concerns in the amendments and unanimously expressed support for using this process. So with that, I hope I've hit the highlights and be able to answer any questions regarding these amendments. And we'll just pull this slide right now, if that's all right with everyone. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Tom. Any questions from assembly members? So I've got a couple then. Tom, on section 4 with the vehicle parts and supplies and service and repair, so they were blank, which means they weren't permitted. Now they're C, conditional use, so they can happen. Are those uses conditional use everywhere? Did you get that, Tom?
Apologize, had trouble with my mic there. So
Okay.
by everywhere, I'm sorry, everywhere in downtown or everywhere?
Throughout Anchorage, I mean, it's vehicle parts and supplies just seems like a retail store, and to make it a conditional use is surprising.
Oh, I understand. Well, these are just bringing forward the use entitlements that existed for these types of businesses that existed under the old Title 21.
Oh, okay.
And so what this has to do with that AMCR provision buried in the back of the Municipal Code of Regulations, in the back of Title 21 that I mentioned. And buried in there was an allowance that Ziva had made to allow tire shops in downtown, and specifically in the B2B. And the provision was buried there, and so needle in the haystack, we had missed it. And so what this is doing is it's bringing forward that conditional use entitlement. In the course of looking at that, we also happened to look back at the old code's definition of gasoline station, gas station, which under the current Title 21 was translated into fueling station. But it just so happens that buried in that definition in the old code for gasoline station was an allowance for minor service and repair, conditional use in the B2B, B2C under old code. And you know, in the old days, back when they wrote the old code, the gasoline service stations were exactly that. That's where you took your car to get my fixes. Fueling stations under current Title 21 reflect that today gasoline stations are not usually also vehicle service stations. And so we realized that in order to bring forward that conditional use entitlement for vehicle service and repair, we actually had to bring forward that entitlement as making that a conditional use in the B2B, B2C. And those two entitlements do actually apply to two existing businesses in downtown, I think in the B2B district. So these just mirror what we intended to do with the Step 1 project, which is to bring forward all the existing use entitlements for downtown. And then in Step 3, like I mentioned in 2022, to come through and reassess the appropriateness of those entitlements. Thank you.
All right, thanks. So just another question, and maybe the Code of Regulations, I've never really understood why those exist.
Yes, thanks for that question. So that provision allowed the flexibility for if an unlisted use type in the old code, uses were listed. If it was allowed, it was listed. If it was prohibited, it was typically also listed. But if it wasn't listed at all, the code specifically said, the old code, that, you know, this code isn't listed, consider it prohibited. However, this provision back in the Code of Regulations allowed a property owner or business to bring forward an unlisted use and to ZEBA, and it allowed ZEBA to give a use entitlement for that unlisted use if that unlisted use's impacts were deemed to be no different from, you know, an allowed use that was listed in the district. And so that was the way, the old code's way of allowing for unlisted uses if they were similar in impacts to to other uses. That flexibility is taken care of in another way in the current code. It's actually just an administrative provision by which the land use review folks can look at an unlisted use. It's not listed at all in the code, and determine what if it is very similar to a listed use. And then if need be, there can be a text amendment to the current code to accommodate that use. So that old ZEBA provision, AMCR, it was based on a provision back in the old code that doesn't even exist anymore. But we determined that it is technically in effect still. It's still sitting there. But it's like oil and water with the current code. We got to, delete it and address those uses and entitlements in it, which is what we've done here in this technical amendment in Section 4, like you mentioned, and also in Section 7. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so any questions from Assembly members? Last chance. If there's anyone on the phone who'd like to speak on this. So Desiree, is that the *6 and they can speak up?
Correct. *6.
Okay, I'll give it a moment. I see a number of phone numbers.
Hello.
Hi, please identify yourself.
Yeah, Eugene Carl Haberman, but I'll be very, 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 very brief. I really appreciate listening to your conversation, but we have the public has a problem here. Whatever you're seeing, we're not seeing, and then I don't see that particular presentation that you were referring to, okay, on the website with the economic development. So it's all in the cloud and not available to the public. That's all I have to say. But so you're having these discussions on documents that you're seeing, but we are not seeing, with respect. Thank you very much.
Right. Yeah, thank you. It's a good point. Is there anyone else? Okay. Okay. Does
Hello.
Hello. Sorry, go ahead.
Hello. Yeah. I'd like to make a comment regarding EV charging. Is this a okay time to do it, or are you having discussion regarding different issue?
I'm sorry. What is the issue?
I would like to make a comment regarding EV charging. Are you having discussion regarding that issue yet, or should I hold off that comment for later?
Oh, I think that sounds like the building code issue. That'll be next. Next slide.
Okay, so I'll just hold off that comment. You'll have more public participation later.
That is, yeah, certainly that's the intent.
All right, sounds good. I'll
Great,
hold off.
thanks. Okay, anyone else on the phone? Okay. From Assembly members, what do you want to do with this?
Mr. Chair, I guess I would move to recommend approval of this ordinance that basically just cleans up the code after our substantial code change that occurred in May.
I'll second that.
Second.
Okay. Okay, any discussion on it? Chris, has this gone through the community council or anything?
There have been no concerns raised.
Okay. Any opposition to that motion? Okay, so at our meeting on Tuesday, when this comes up, we'll say this was reviewed at the committee and recommended approval. All right, thanks everyone. Okay, so moving on to the big meal of the day is 2020-80 5, which is updates to Title 23, the building codes. Is there someone here who wants to go through that with staff?
Yes, this is Brian Dean, Anchorage Fire Marshal, and I have a brief presentation to hopefully frame our discussion a little bit on some of the topics that have been coming up quite a bit.
Okay. So do you have like a PowerPoint or something that you would show us?
I do have PowerPoint slides, and I forwarded a PDF of those slides this morning, so I'm hoping that you all have copies of those as well.
Okay, is there a way for the public to get a hold of these things, like now?
Kiana, maybe you could speak to that.
I am actually putting it on the CEDC webpage right now.
Yeah, I don't see an email from this morning from you, but you can put it on the screen.
We definitely got the files, Mr. Welton.
Okay. Well, I don't want to hold things up. I'll click around. So for people on the phone who would like to see this, they can go to muni.org, click on Assembly. Over on the left, you'll see committees. Go to committees, and it puts you on a page. And if you scroll down, and economic development website, click on that, and you'll be able to see the document.
Okay, and just to be sure, is everybody looking at the slide indicating firefighting water supply?
Can you hold off until we all have the opportunity to log on?
Yeah, we can hang on a minute.
And John, we were emailed that by Kiana this morning, right before the meeting. There's about 5 attachments, so it is in that group.
Oh, okay. Yeah, sorry. It's obvious now.
Michelson, again, I'm looking on the web page, and where did you say the committee section was on the? I'm on the muni.org website.
Click on Assembly. There's a big icon.
Assembly. Okay.
Then if you're on that page, pick committees. It'll be on the left. Little, just a blue link. The 4th one down. Did you get that?
No, I see municipal meetings. Watch now.
No, go down. Then you see regular assembly meetings. Then dropping down next assembly work sessions. Then you'll see committees.
Okay, got it. Yeah.
Hit that. And then scroll down. You have the list of committees. And the 4th one down is Community and Economic Development Committee. That's us. And hit web page.
I see committees, board commissions, no meetings, councils. I do not see economic development meetings there.
Are you on the committees page?
Community and economic development.
Well, I'm on committees and liaisons.
Okay, good. Scroll down the 4th. If you just not on the left, don't look at the left stuff anymore. Now go down the middle and you'll see committee and liaisons. Then you'll see committees, AMAT's policy.
Yeah, web page.
All right, budget and finance, committee on homelessness, and then you'll see community and economic development committee.
Yeah.
Okay, and you hit the web page.
And nothing comes up.
Oh, you need bandwidth. You should be on the Community and Economic Development Committee.
I did that, and it just says next meeting. It gives me a schedule.
Yeah, that's good. And there's a list of links underneath it. Downtown corrections, building codes, and we're on AFD sprinkler presentation, the 3rd bullet below next meeting. And so if you're in the next meeting, that's today.
apologize. I'm just,
Okay. You got half a dozen other people doing the same thing, so.
September 10th, next
You say-
meeting.
No, go September.
Sprinkler presentation.
There you go.
Got it. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Brian, it's all yours.
Okay, thank you very much, and good morning, everybody. Hopefully, this presentation will be brief, but still frame the issue that we're dealing with and that we absolutely have to address. What it comes down to is firefighting water supply, and how we address that as we develop further and further away from our core areas and away from our existing infrastructure. And as a municipality for the last several decades, we have kind of ignored this in a fashion, and not maybe through intent, but just through continual maybe amending out of requirements that do address this, and it's something that gets more and more problematic with our development that becomes more and more remote. So what we want to look at is what the existing code requires of us now to provide firefighting water supply. And to do that, typically there's three options available, and that's to extend your hydrant system, provide a private system such as reservoirs or drafting sites or even private hydrants, or constructing to the Wildland Urban Interface Code, which is defensible space and some ignition resistant construction. And it may involve water sources too, but it's a little more complicated process there. And these are applicable to new subdivision developments and then just new buildings on lots that people would own, just so everybody's clear where the applicability would be. Some of those are pretty difficult to achieve and maybe hinder people's ability to develop on their lots. So an amendment was proposed to allow or to provide another option. And that option is to provide automatic sprinkler systems where areas where water supply is not very reliable. Councils and we discussed this with some community council members, and it actually did help frame the problem even further. We heard about the large lots and limited access, and the concern about the requirement for this on the cost for new construction on here. Particularly, I want to make sure that we understand about the problems with large lots and limited access and further out, and those are the things that we really need to address, whether they're through firefighting water supplies or a sprinkler option, something that to do. We heard about the data on the efficacy of sprinkler systems. Do they save property and lives? How do sprinklers work in our environment? And you know, we've been doing sprinklers in Anchorage for decades, both residential and commercial. Fairbanks uses them, even the North Slope uses them. So the technical aspects have been ironed out pretty well for the use of them here. And it's just like any other engineering feature that we put in our houses, and they do work very, very well. Some additional comments from community councils. One of the big things here that I want to point out is the idea of undetermined the value that we have on the sprinkler systems, or the undetermined value of the added safety feature. And this is where I think that the municipality, we as a community, have not done a sufficient job. Maybe we in the fire department too have not done an adequate job of bringing people's understanding of what all the engineering safety features that we could provide and that have been provided across the country, and that are provided in code provisions across the country, including sprinkler systems. And I'm going to focus mostly on sprinkler systems, even though we're not proposing to do a wholesale sprinkler amendment for the municipality. These are only in these areas that is an option where firefighting water supplies are limited and hard to do, that this is an additional option for those new places that come in. But really, the concern about an undetermined value of the added safety. And when we consider that, we really need to do a good job of educating the public and the community about what we do here and how we need to respond. And we look at this every time that we respond to a fire. We as the fire department do this, and maybe people that are close to these places where an emergency happens maybe understand this too. But as you can imagine, when we respond to a place such as this fire in Eagle River up on the hillside, you can see it's buried in a deep forested area. This did happen more in the winter season, so we're lucky. And if it had happened in the summer on a hot, dry time, it could have been far different with catastrophic respect. As it was, the home was a total loss. We brought apparatus from all over Eagle River and even Anchorage to battle this blaze for quite a bit of time. And that's the reality that we end up seeing on these places is we get there and it's so far gone that it takes a lot of resources to bring it under control. And then we end up with a lot of property loss and the potential for even further conflagration. This is another one out there. When we look at the potential loss, this family were out of this home for quite a while. We went into battle the fire and were driven out because of the progression of the fire, the extensive progression of the fire. As they were pulling out, a firefighter fell through the floor on this one and was injured. Was able to thankfully self-extricate himself from that area, but and recovered. But there was an injury on that one due to the extension of this fire and the ability for it to continue on. So we look at the property loss, we look at the possible injuries, and there's an even higher cost that we run into here. And we see this time and time again, and we hate to see it. And so we want to make sure this is part of the equation that we deal with. And we're going to hear a lot coming back about the cost. And we have to remember the additional costs here, not only in property, but also in lives, because it does happen again and again. And I've responded to each of these fires that we're showing on here, and I've seen the devastation, and it truly is devastating. And we want to do whatever we can to try to mitigate this and address the problem. And so as we consider what we're looking at, what we're bringing to the scene, we have to consider our resources that we're committing to fire emergencies in areas that don't have the infrastructure that needs to be in place to adequately address them. What sort of footing are we putting our emergency responders on to respond to these things? What sort of environment are we putting our property owners in there? And not only the people that are choosing to build at the time, but the subsequent property owners that would come in later on. And then the people next door to those properties where the fire emergency happens. We just want to put ourselves on good, solid, responsible, sound footing. What we learned over the last several decades, while we were kind of ignoring this problem, is that houses burn faster now. We used to have more time to arrive at a fire and be able to put it out more in its incipient stage. But now, because of open floor plans, lightweight construction, and a lot of the things that we put into our homes, the synthetic materials just burn faster and hotter. And so by the time firefighting resources are able to get there, it's far too gone to be able to keep it to a minimum, but often ends up being a good portion of the structure that burns and just sets us back. UL did a study a while ago just showing this legacy construction, what they call it, and the modern construction, and the time it takes to go from a small incipient fire to a full conflagration. And this is what it looks like in 4 minutes, the picture on the right, and that's untenable space. And 4 minutes, we do a good job of getting there kind of in that time frame from when we're notified, but there's still the lag time of when a person has to become aware of the property. Most of our fires are our tough fires are where we see loss of life are happening at night where people aren't aware of it, and there's a lag time there. So you're actually talking more in the 6 to 8 minute time frame when we get notified and are able to arrive on scene. So we're dealing this because we come back to the cost. And what is the cost? We look in Anchorage structure fire property losses in the last 3 years. They're in the 10 millions of dollars range every single year, and that's something that we have to account for. Are we going to continue suffering these losses? Or are we going to be able to address it in some form or fashion? We know that sprinklers save lives and reduce properties. They're intended as a property mitigation strategy, but the reality is they have proven over time and time again to save lives. We know that most of our civilian fire deaths are from home fires. That's where people reside. They spend a lot of time. That's where you cook and sleep. And most of our over half of our fires are caused by human error, not necessarily how the building is constructed, but our cooking and our candles and our smoking and our heaters. Those are the things that are causing the bulk of the fires. When we have sprinklers present, it's an 85% lower risk of dying. And that's because the sprinkler puts out the fire in its incipient stage. 90% of the time, the sprinkler activation, a single sprinkler head puts that fire out. And even higher, 97%, it limits it to the room of origin. So you're not risking the rest of the property, the rest of the residents, but you're able to control that fire in a very small area. Resulting in reduction in property damage, 71% reduction in property damage because fire sprinklers are in the home. We've heard concern about the water damage from sprinklers, and we have to consider that water damage is going to happen with or without sprinklers, because when we show up as the fire department, we do bring water with us, and when we're able to establish water supplies through tanker operations or the 1,000 gallons that are on apparatus already, we're going to put a lot of water on that as much as we can, especially when we're seeing a large conflagration by the time we get there. We have to remember that sprinklers are putting out 10 to 26 gallons of water per minute, but when we introduce those fire hoses, we're going 100 gallons per minute to 250 gallons per minute and above. If we get into the fire extending into the roof structure, we might put up an aerial apparatus, which is putting actual tons of water onto a structure. So much so that our firefighters have to be cautious about structural collapse because of the water weight. So when the fire department gets there to put water on, it's way, way more than the sprinkler systems are going to be putting on there. This is what it actually looks like in a home, side-by-side test, one with sprinklers and one without, same configuration, same amount of fire load. The top one, of course, is extinguished by a sprinkler system. The bottom is extinguished by the fire crews when it advanced too far for. There's no sprinkler there to put it out in its incipient stage, so it did a full room flashover. And this is the real difference in the amount of property damage for a sprinklered home versus a non-sprinklered home when you're talking about a compartment fire, and it's very real. So we've talked about the cost on the infrastructure, the cost of structural damage, the cost on potential even lives, but there is this cost that we keep hearing about, the price of sprinklers. What does it cost to install a sprinkler? And so we heard of a varying amount of information about that, and it does vary. And so we took an actual review of 14 projects that have actually happened in Anchorage over the last couple of years, and just put information out there about what is the cost. And then we found the lowest, $7,700 on a 2,700 square feet of new construction. The unit price, that's really important. We want to look at that unit price because that's going to average over any square footage, but that one's $278 per square foot. The highest, $38,000. That's a huge spread there. It's a much bigger house, of course, and it was a retrofit, so those are typically more expensive, coming in at a unit price of $687 per square foot. we took all these and averaged them out. So we're looking at the average of 3,280 square foot, $15,000 for the install price, and your unit price of $4.80 a square foot. We did want to look at where these would likely go in, and they're probably places that would require a tank and a pump. And so we took out the ones on city water because those are cheaper, and we only calculated the ones that would involve a tank and a pump. And the average unit price ended up being $4.89 per square foot. Not a lot more, but a little bit higher cost on that. So when we're looking at how much these costs, these are what we can actually figures we can actually use to further the conversation. And when we talk about, we want to understand what the costs are, because that's what we're really dealing with, not just the cost of development and the cost of the actual sprinkler system in the price of a home, but our firefighting to our neighborhoods. We want our community in property and even in lives. So we want to make sure that we're addressing that, because we're going to continue to develop, and AFD is still going to respond to the fire emergencies. But what are we going to find when we get there? We just have to make sure that we address firefighting water supply, because it's a critical part of the development equation, and where it's limited, sprinklers are actually a reasonable option. And that concludes the presentation.
Well, thanks, Brian. Let's go in the queue. Meg, you had a question?
Thanks, Mr. Wilton. So it was maybe answered, but I want to make sure I'm clear. The purpose of sprinklers is life safety or structure preservation, or both? I guess I want to get to the fundamental reason for sprinklers.
Thank you, Assemblymember Zalatel. Sprinklers originally were designed for property protection, but what we have found out through the decades of their use is they end up providing a life safety aspect as well, just because it limits the damage and controls the damage significantly, both to the people that are in the structure and need to escape, but also for responding emergency responders, less risk for them to extinguish and overhaul the properties.
Thank you.
Follow up. All right, Chris, you had a question?
Yeah, thank you, Marshall Dean. Two things. One, I know you used a photograph of an incident that occurred in 2018 in Eastchester, the Flats. Doesn't really fit for this, right? We're not talking about adding sprinkler requirements to properties that are within the water system and hydranted, right?
Assemblymember Constant, that's correct. That is just illustrative of what we end up responding to, and that fire could be the same there as it could be up on the hillside. I did include some fires that we had responded to in the hillside that were just as devastating, and that's just to illustrate that without what we could do with sprinklers, and that's because this conversation is kind of focusing on sprinklers yes or sprinklers no, or sprinklers are good or sprinklers are not so good. So I just want to illustrate that.
Perfect, thank you. And but the real question I have now is, you talk about reasonable option, and there are two other options there. Can you speak to how this is an option and not a requirement, or is it a requirement?
And this is what came about in community council discussions, and I appreciate this discussion because it frames it very well. The other options for firefighting water supply, they may be easier in some cases, they may be more difficult in some cases, and I think we had some examples of areas in Birchwood specifically where because of the distance from hydrant systems already in place, and the size of the lots, that sprinklers might be the only option left, or basically the other ones are too expensive, but sprinklers are the cheapest option in that respect. So when you're looking at it in that matter, if sprinklers are your only option, then that's what you would have to do.
So as it stands right now, you have options, how are people achieving the goal right now or not achieving the goal? If this one option isn't there, say the same scenario in Birchwood, what are they doing?
Right now, if you had a lot that you want to develop, the requirement is that you have to find some way to provide firefighting water supply, either extending a mainline water extension to provide a hydrant within 600 feet of your property, or a private system, which could include a tank. There are areas around that have various tanks or drafting sites that they use to be able to draw water from. You can do a type of construction that is fire resistant coupled with defensible space that would provide a similar type of protection. Those are the choices that a person would have when developing a lot at this point.
So a quick last follow-up, I think, Mr. Welton, then we're not taking either of those options off the table, right?
That's correct.
So effectively, although all the arguments we're hearing are this is going to ruin construction, it's going to make it so expensive, no one's going to be able to buy a house, what we're actually doing could be argued as providing at least a less expensive alternative than others could be relative to the specifics of your property, right? It's one more arrow in your quiver.
That's correct. In looking at these other options from real projects that have been proposed, they can be quite difficult, and the sprinkler system may be the easier one.
Okay, any other questions from assembly members? Yeah, I might follow up on that. So, Brian, we've been building on the hillside in Eagle River, and I see more Firewise construction, but not all of it. More metal siding and stone and so on, and more clearing. But so it doesn't feel like this is a new option. It feels like the entire section is new. So maybe you can cover, is this always been in code and we haven't enforced it? Or is this whole section with these various options new? And also sprinklers have been added.
So Assemblymember Weddleton, this is fairly new since the 2012 code adoption cycle. And this is a particularly tough thing to address because it hasn't been really visible to a lot of people for a number of years. And the reason I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation is that we've kind of ignored this for a decade. There has been a specific exemption to single family home construction for this provision of firefighting water supply since I found amendments clear back into the 80s. And of course, back then, construction was a little bit less volatile. But as we've moved on, that provision has gone forward up until the 2012 code adoption cycle, when the Fire Code Committee said, wow, we can't keep developing further and further out without addressing this firefighting water supply option. And so they didn't forward the exemption for single family homes. And so at that time, it became a requirement for people developing single family homes to provide for this firefighting water supply. And the implementation of it, of course, isn't as smooth as just amending the code. And so there are many places that were already in process, many places that were just was apparently too difficult to do this. And even when sometimes it was brought up as a requirement there, it just wasn't enforced. And that's not a good way to have laws on the books. And so we either need to provide a way to account for firefighting water supply, or we need to come up with some different means or avenue.
Okay, well, I wonder if I might have missed a point there. So this, the water supply section, single and two dwelling homes have been exempted until 2012, and in 2012 that exemption went away, but we did not, but we kind of ignored it. Did I catch that right?
That's a fair fair synopsis of it. I wouldn't say ignored it, but sometimes when things are difficult to address, they don't get addressed well, and I think that's probably the best scenario that we're looking at here.
Okay.
But yes, you're right. It was an exemption up until the 2012 code adoption cycle.
Okay. And for assembly members, I see Jamie, you said hands been up. I'm watching the chat, and I don't since I do this on my phone, the hand up's not real obvious to me. So if you can do kind of ask to get in the queue through the chat, that would work better. Thanks. So I will go to Jamie first because it appears that she's been anxious or raised her hand first.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, thank you. So my first question, sorry, my throat. Anyways, I asked this question, and I'm sorry, Brian, I haven't been able to email you back. But a couple of ones I wanted to know, you said it's been in the books, it's been in code. I want to know that code, and I want to see that because you said it's been there since 2012. And one of my original questions was when we had that work session with our community council out here in Chugach Eagle River, was that the certificate of occupancy is typically issued by the fire marshal following inspection to ensure the IBC, and I want to go as far as saying that the IRC as well, has been fully met. So my question will go back, and if you need time to think about it and get back to me, but I'm going to re-ask this on the work session, is why, if this was in code, which I don't believe it was, and I don't believe it was, we would just ignore something that should have been enforced. That's my opinion until I see it in writing. But if this is accurate, then why didn't the fire marshals or fire chiefs or anybody come out when the inspection was done on these homes and enforce the rules? And why was a certificate of occupancy issued? Number one. Number two, just to do this last one, because that other one you might have to research. Number two, we actually don't have options out here. We have one. So when you say we have options and there's four, Chugach Eagle River, when you're building on a 2-acre lot, which homes are usually less expensive, and there's a reason people do that, we don't have an option, but we just have the one option, and that would be the sprinklers. So then when we are going to say that, you're actually pricing out 48% of individuals of race or color. The demographics go down as far as being able to afford to buy a home. It goes from 48% to 41% already during COVID-19. So now we're going to literally price out so many more individuals to buy a home, which could just ramp up unemployment and everything else. Then also, there was a log cabin you said that was out here that caught fire, but it was a log cabin. And it wasn't necessarily occupied, and it wasn't even a new build. So we know new builds are safer than old builds. So there's a lot of concern I have, and I think all those need to be addressed. I don't know how you're going to answer those questions, but if you want to, or feel free, that's fine by me.
Thank you, Assemblymember Allard. I'll take a stab at that.
Assemblymember Weddleton, when you have time, this is Michelson, have some comments.
Okay, for let me get through assembly members and then we'll go to people on the phone.
Excellent.
So the first question about the certificate of occupancy and about the fire marshal authority in that. So the certificate of occupancy is issued by the development service, the building safety department. The fire department isn't involved in that except for commercial structures. So single family homes don't get a certificate of occupancy review by the fire marshal. That's just not part of the general process because there's only a few portions of the residential construction that are involved with the International Fire Code. And that's typically site access, water supply, and then if you put a sprinkler or fire alarm system in, then the review of those would fall on the fire department authority. Chugach and Eagle River don't have certificates of occupancy. You might get a certificate of completion out there because they're land use permits as opposed to building permits. And so I think what you're getting at is why this why this provision wasn't brought up and addressed for the myriad of houses that have been built over time. And a lot of it has to do with visibility, just because the fire department is typically focused on commercial construction as opposed to the residential side. But this is one aspect that the fire code addresses, and I don't think that we can continue to ignore it. So we want to make sure and address it in some form or fashion. The second question about not having options, I recognize what you're saying, that the other options are so expensive that they don't become options, but they actually are options, and some of them are very site specific on how they can apply. And as I mentioned before, yes, sprinklers might be the most cost effective option that you have out there, just depending on the site constraints. I hate to get into the affordable housing aspect of this, because I don't think the places that these are going to apply are going to be the affordable housing areas that we're looking at. I think those are going to be much cheaper and more readily be built in places that we have existing infrastructure. And I think that's the reality that we're going to look at. In the slides that I presented, none of those were a log cabin. I have been out on log cabin fires out in Eagle River, but the ones I presented were regular home fires. One was a very large home fire up on the hill. The other one was, well, I guess it was a Lindahl cedar home. So I don't think those are log cabins, but it was a cedar home. The other one was just your typical frame construction house. So it happens, and we respond to them. So that's all I wanted to present there.
Okay, any follow-up on that, Jamie?
No, I'll just take some notes. I'll address it again on Tuesday. Thank you. Appreciate it, Brian.
Crystal?
Thank you. You know, I have the same concerns in terms of why we're doing this now, why we're doing this to new construction. I think my bigger concern is the fact that we seem to have, the fires that we seem to have are not new construction. They're older. And we have a much larger inventory of homes throughout the municipality that are older and are susceptible to fires for a variety of reasons, some being electrical. And I get that. I think we all understand that that's a risk of an older home. But what concerns me is that we are basically trying to say that all these newer homes are the higher risk and they need these sprinkler systems, or all these homes that are outside of the fire safety area, i.e. down Eagle River Valley or, you know, north of Eagle River, are at a greater risk for having a fire and then, of course, potentially burning down. And I think you have to weigh that actual risk with the true cost, because, you know, Jamie's right. We don't get an option in that case. It becomes a requirement for building out. And a lot of homes are not they're not, you know, they're not the $1 million homes out in Chugach, Eagle River. They're building on smaller lots that are in between older residential areas. And they're going to be building a house next to a 40 or 50-year-old home just because they want the acreage, and they're going to be on a well and septic. So they're not going to have access probably ever to city water, and they're not going to have some kind of a developer there to build some kind of a water containment tank. So anyway, so it absolutely comes down to a requirement then that sprinklers would be put in. So again, this comes down to that idea of whether or not it's worth the risk, the potential risk to that structure is really worth the additional costs. And then for the home buyer, what it comes down to is that additional cost worth it to me to live here, or can I go to the valley and pay much less, including taxes on that property after we're done building that building or that house? So I think there are a lot of things to think about here. I think in an ideal world, what we would be doing is we would be putting, you know, the municipality would be to put some of these water holding tanks in places. The municipality would be making sure that water was extended to places that really needed it. So there would be a lot of infrastructure costs that the municipality would begin to bear for the good of all. Because like I said, the vast majority of the homes out there are older homes that are never going to have sprinkler systems in them. And they're the ones that are probably at higher risk. So to me, that's a bigger, broader conversation. And now we're really talking money. So anyway, I know we have several builders on that want to speak to this. I do believe that they will give you the more exact numbers on the cost. I've seen 2 different builders give me numbers where they have cost out the actual cost in a building that they are doing presently. And they are about 50% more than what we're seeing coming from the presentation. So I'm sure they can give us better numbers on that too. So I'm anxious to hear what they have to say. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Brian, any response?
You know, I'm not sure that there was a question in there, just a commentary about older homes being more susceptible. And in some respects, I would agree with that, just because we put more things in older homes and we cut them up a little bit more and remodel them, and the systems might deteriorate over time. But even the new homes are going to become old homes at some point, and we're just going to continue to respond to fires when they occur, and we just want to make sure that we're in a position to respond to them effectively and minimize the amount of loss that we would encounter there, and put our emergency responders on the best footing.
Okay. Anything else from assembly members? I see Chris, you're back in.
Yeah, just it was alluded to by Brian, and I don't know what the facts are, but I don't have in any kind of evidentiary form that old houses are any more or less susceptible to fire than new houses. And I last night heard quite a harrowing tale of a brand new multi-million-dollar home on a big lake in Anchorage that burned within a week of its occupancy. And so I don't know that assertion is fact, and I would love more information.
I can address that a bit there.
Yeah,
What we do know is that regardless of the type of construction or how safe we construct the homes, more than 50% of home fires are caused by human error. They're caused by cooking fires, are the #1 cause of home fires. And so you cook in your old home and you cook in your new home. We still do candles. We still do space heaters. So the fires do occur, and more than half of them are not based on the construction of the home. It's what we put in it and how we use the home.
So Brian, if you don't mind, with the chief for the work session, maybe contemplate what a reasonable compromise be. Sprinkler systems required in kitchens. So I don't need an answer now.
Will do.
Okay. Chief Hetrick, you'd like to comment?
Thank you, Assemblymember Weddleton. I appreciate it. I would just like to echo some of the things that Brian said. And the fire service, emergency services, have been trying to convince people to go with residential sprinklers for decades. And I liken it to where we were in the 70s with seatbelts. Auto manufacturers were very adamant that if we required seatbelts in cars, low-income people would not be able to buy cars. Today, you would never buy a car that didn't have seatbelts in it. It's included in the price, and the price is much lower. One of the contributing factors to the increased cost of residential sprinkler installations, whether in new or retrofit housing, is the fact that we don't do it enough for the market to drive the price of those installations down. Also, if we would turn in this direction and make it either a requirement or consider making it more of a viable option for homeowners to consider this for the protection of not just their property and the things in their property, but also for their family, especially elders and small children who cannot self-rescue, that would not only drive the costs down, it would also improve an industry and put more people to work. And I think that is definitely something that we have to take into account now is there aren't very many residential sprinkler installers in Alaska. There should be with the amount of building that we do up here. And now is the perfect time to do this kind of a project because we see building going on all over because interest rates are really low. And that small drop in the interest rate more than offsets the amount of increased cost for any type of residential sprinkler installation. This was proposed as an option to reduce costs to developers and builders, to give them another option to where they could start putting houses in places where we have concerns about getting a fire water system to them. This was meant as a way to come up with a less expensive solution, and I think we should encourage that and think about that. But having responded myself to multiple fire fatalities, that has definitely been in my line of work for the last 34 years. Alaska has a significant rate of fire fatalities, and the people who die in those fires are often people who can't not self-rescue and struggle with that. So I think it is time for us to have absolutely the time for us to have this conversation, past time that we have this conversation. And I believe Assembly Member Zalatel has said this before, is when's the time to plant a tree for shade? You do it now. And I think that's where we're at. We cannot address the previous, and I will use the term failure, but for us not encouraging people to use residential sprinklers, we cannot address past things that maybe we should have done a better job at. But I think now is the time to start having that conversation. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Just briefly, we've got a few comments in chat.
Saying that you're disbanding the Anchorage Fire Department and that people should fend for themselves and try and put out the fires themselves?
Okay, we'll get to public comments shortly. So one of in the text is Assemblywoman Allard questions. I think newer homes have fire retardant drywall. Structural engineers will and can testify. Not to mention sprinklers will be triggered by heat. Sprinklers will go off nonstop in the kitchen. And Brian Dean responds on slide 16 of his PowerPoint. The image on the right has fire resistant drywall. Sprinkler heads are rated at various temperatures depending upon where you need them. And we could maybe follow up on that, but I've got Meg in the queue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank
Terror
you
weapon down on Anchorage.
Okay, go ahead, Meg.
Yeah, so the comment made by Mr. Constant has me thinking, is it possible to do strategic placement of sprinklers that would be in their highest and best use based on some sort of a risk assessment that would achieve the goal of sprinklering, but maybe help reduce some of the cost?
I'll jump in. This is Fire Marshal Dean. That is possible, and it's something that occurs rarely because once you're putting them in, it's sometimes difficult to tell exactly which part of the house things are going to ignite in, because we've had fires. Like I say, kitchens are a hotspot, so to speak, because that's where most of the fires happen. So that would be a logical location. But we've had them in living rooms, we've had them in basements, we've had them in bedrooms. So once you're there, finding the ideal spot is a little more difficult.
Mr. Chair, if I may follow up really quick.
Yeah, sure.
Thanks. I mean, to some extent, though, there's some strategic things in the fire code already, like where we place smoke detectors, particularly if you're a landlord, they have to be in particular places. So, I guess I would ask you to think on if there were kind of more likely places. I get the kitchen, maybe bedrooms because people are otherwise asleep when a fire may occur. So I guess I would just ask, and I can follow up via email if we can continue the dialogue about that. But that seems like it may make sense in the overall, but I don't know. I mean, I guess the question would also be, the follow-up question is, would it reduce the cost, or once you're in, and it's just the number of sprinkler heads you're ultimately putting in the structure at that point, because the main costs are really not based on how many, but just actually doing the sprinklering things.
Assembly Member Zalatil agreed, and I would welcome any discussion to explore that.
Okay, if I could just for a minute jump in. So Desiree, I'm getting a text from someone who says they're calling in and waiting to be admitted.
I do not see anybody.
Door and wage your tyranny using the Anchorage Fire Department.
Desiree, go ahead.
I was going to say, I don't see anybody in the waiting room to be admitted into the meeting.
Okay, so it may be a more complicated issue. Okay, so I think I'd like to get to the public listening, but I want to just kind of outline some of the possible things that can be done here. And one is, so Brian, you can, let me go through the list and then you can tell me where I made mistakes. But one is, for many years, we have exempted single family and two family homes from the 507.1. It's my understanding. 2012, that we did not amend it to provide that exemption, but that could happen again. We could amend it so that that doesn't apply. We could require sprinklers be added. Should we leave that 507.1 in there, we could add sprinklers, which at that point, then it becomes a new option compared to the International Building Code's definition of water supply. Or we can bring in 507.1 without sprinklers. And then there's probably some other permutations, like we could apply it to all new construction, which I think is the implication now, or possibly only new subdivisions and exempt infill somehow. Are there other, and I'm just thinking different ways the assembly could go on this. Are there other options? And maybe you could comment on those as well.
Thank you, Assembly Member Weddleton. You outlined them very well. I think those are the options that we're looking at here. I know that there are other jurisdictions that even looked at square footage requirements, that they maybe added sprinklers to larger homes rather than smaller homes. And so there's a moving scale that you could look at there. You can look at single lot development as opposed to subdivision development. But we do really just want to make sure that we're addressing this water supply issue, and not continue down the road we're in right now. And I think the sprinkler was a reasonable option. How we end up massaging that is the tough question.
Okay. Anything else from assembly members? Okay, well, let's go ahead and to some of the callers. Desiree, I see Austin's in there. Austin, go ahead.
Just ask a quick question. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just wondering what the process is for this. I know that we have this before us potentially to vote on Tuesday, right? But it sounds like there's a bit of evaluation. We've received a lot of feedback. I'm just wondering if anyone from the administration wants to speak to the potential process we could take moving forward.
Through the chair, this is Chris Sheardy, Director of Economic and Community Development. You've outlined the current process, which is this item is up for public hearing on Tuesday, the 29th of September. And so the Assembly certainly at that time has the ability to take its normal actions, either adopting the Title 23 building codes, continuing the public hearing to a later date if the Assembly is interested in further work sessions or discussions, et cetera.
follow up on that, Austin?
No, yeah, I guess I knew that. I was just trying to see if the administration had any other.
Chairman Weddle, this is Michelson. I have some comments.
Well, let's hold on. We'll get to public comments real quick.
Yeah, I want to leave time for public, so I'll just let it go. And I'd love to hear from the development community about how this impacts them. Thanks.
So just a quick one from me for Chris then. Is it, I know there's some urgency in getting these approved for, so that people submitting plans know what the rules will be. Is there a benefit in taking, okay, if there's some controversial sections of it, pulling those out, passing the rest, and then dealing with the other ones more deliberately?
Through the chair, thank you. Good question. I think my gut reaction is that we would want to keep these intact and work through the remaining issues that are being raised today prior to taking final action on the entire package. But I will chat offline with some of the other smarter folks than I and get you a response if the answer is different. Thank you.
All right, great, thanks. Okay, well, let's give a chance for people to speak. Only because he's chimed in twice. Paul Michelson, would you like to go? And I think we should limit it to just a couple minutes each. Hit your high points. And remember, there is a public hearing on Tuesday.
Chairman Weddleton, this is Michelson.
Go ahead.
Yeah, several things have been said here. I've been doing, I'm a builder in town, been building in Anchorage for 45 years. I've been involved with the code community, both at the local level, the ICC level, and the National Association of Home Builders level. The fire sprinkler issue has been a very contentious issue for about 20 years. I think there's 44 states right now that have banned mandatory use of fire sprinklers by any municipalities. Alaska, and I'm sorry I wasn't prepared for today's meeting, but Alaska, I lobbied, and we basically were successful in getting legislation through state legislature that says no municipality within the state of Alaska can mandate any sprinkler systems without 3 public hearings spaced 30 days apart before they can do it. So right there, I think if you hold a meeting Tuesday and try to pass this, you're going against legislation that's on the books in the state of Alaska. The other issue, Chairman Jamie, I apologize, don't know her last name. She was spot on. The Fire Coalition, their testimony and their data is skewed. People die from fire deaths, usually not from the fire, but from the smoke and inhalation that gets them first. And all the fires that they show you on their screens that are quite nice that the fire sprinkler systems put out are basically, for lack of a better word, arson fires. They're set under ideal conditions, under ideal setups. We have found, National Association of Home Builders has found that fire damage in houses built after 2008, the fire damage in the houses have gone down almost 88%. The new wiring, the new plumbing, as Assemblywoman Jamie said, has been improved so much that the chance for fires have gone down drastically. And then to penalize those who build only big houses is wrong, because if you look at statistics, most fires happen in smaller dwellings than they do in the larger dwellings. I can't answer why that is. I don't know if one sector is more aware than the other. I don't know the answer, but statistically, there's less fires in larger houses than there are in smaller houses. I think with the public not being able to attend the assembly meeting on Tuesday, I think this is wrong for you to ask for this to go through without the community, the building community, and the public having a say in this and having an open meeting. And I think this should be put off until the mayor lets us back into the assembly chambers. And I'll answer any questions you have. I did that all real quick. I have a lot more data I can gather for you if you'd like, but costs are skewed here. The costs are much different than they're advertising here, than Marshall Dean is advertising.
All right, thanks. We actually do, the assembly chambers will be open to public testimony, and we also have a phone testimony, which has been very effective as well. So people we will have a robust public hearing for sure. And that has been the case for our previous meeting as well. I have a question from Ms. Zolotel. Do we have an attorney on to address the information about the public hearings? And I think Mr. Schutte, you'd address that to me as well. So.
Thank you. Yes, through the chair, I believe the municipal attorney, Kate Vogel, has weighed in and provided an answer to assembly members on whether or not the public meeting pace described by Mr. Michelson is required for this particular code adoption. And the answer was no, because this is not requiring or mandating sprinklers for all new construction, all new homes. So that was the ruling from MOA Legal. I don't believe they're on the call though today. I'm sorry.
Okay, and that maybe we could address clearly on Tuesday when we get to this. Crystal, you have a question? Oh, actually, I think we might need to extend if someone's willing to do that. We give the public more time.
I have a comment, but I'll go ahead and move 10 minutes, so that'll give us till 10:40.
Okay, any opposition? Okay, we'll extend to 10:40. Thank you. Crystal, go ahead.
Thank you. You know, I've been looking into that state statute as well because I had concerns about the process, because that's really, the state statute says that no municipality can require sprinkler systems. That just, it starts off that way, point blank. But then it says if a municipality decides to require sprinkler systems, it has to go through this process. So the process, the hinge word, I guess there, the key word is that word required. And I guess what I'm arguing is that essentially there are places within our municipality that cannot comply with any of the other options. So therefore it is a requirement that they would have to put sprinkler systems into these new homes. So based on that, that tells me that according to the state statutes, we have a process that's been outlined. And the process is that you have to have 3 public meetings within 60 to 120 days. So it means that we actually would have to have at least one more public hearing. And if I'm counting it correctly, it would have to be after October 25th, would have to be the 3rd one, in order to make sure that we were in that 60 to 120 day period. We'd have to at least have the 3rd one by that, after that 60-day point. So anyway, so the idea that we're giving people that additional opportunity to be heard in a public hearing setting is, I think, key to that requirement. So that's what I'm hoping that we will take seriously. So thank you.
All right, thank you. Chris, go ahead.
Thanks. Yeah, I don't know that I agree with Ms. Kennedy's read of the requirement, but I don't know that there's any harm in us just adopting that as our method, even if it's not required. But I would point out, it's very interesting with just hearing the snip of the state statute that Ms. Kennedy read. It says you can't do this, and then it says specifically, first line, you can't do this, and then it says, well, you can do this in the next line if you go through this process. And so clearly we might benefit from a more thorough review of that piece of the state law from our attorneys. So it makes sense, because it doesn't make sense to say, A, you can't do this, and B, you can do this. But really the gist of the comment is, if there's no reason, if there's no harm that would accrue other than the possibility someone might die, but no one's going to have sprinklers in a month anyways, then what's the harm in allowing another public hearing? So just for the purposes of process, I don't think it's unreasonable for us to contemplate that.
All right, thank you. Anything else from assembly members or staff? Okay, can we go back to public comments? So Paul spoke. Speakers can hit *6 and please be brief so others can speak. Desiree, is that the best way to handle this?
This is Drew Cason with the Home Builders.
Okay, go ahead, Drew.
Yeah, so I'll try and run through a couple of these things here real quick. I think we can give you a multitude of examples since the 2012 code was adopted of up through fourplexes that have been built more than 600 feet from a hydrant have not been required to add a new hydrant or sprinkler. So whether or not there's a requirement ostensibly on the books with no enforcement mechanism, if you pass this and then start applying it all the time, that's a new requirement. In practice. Now, I don't disagree with some of people like Chris Constant saying that maybe the state law doesn't apply. But likewise, if you put in code that you can build your house of gold or you can put a sprinkler in it, that would give you options. One of the options is stupid and the other one's sprinklers. So that's options, but it's not realistic options. And so in practice, that's still a sprinkler requirement. I would say this is similar. I wanted to address one of the comments made in response to Assemblywoman Allard's comment on affordable housing from the fire marshal, who said more or less, through my reading, that new homes are just for the wealthy and this won't affect affordable housing. And that's really frustrating to hear. We're partnering on a series of events with the Coalition to End Homeless because they get it. Coconut Housing gets it. The people who are in the affordable housing space get that you are significantly impacting the availability of affordable housing when you increase costs on any part of the housing market. The vast majority of the affordable homes in Anchorage are hand-me-down houses where people have moved on to newer and better houses. And so we got to keep that cycle going if we want to keep freeing up space on the other end of the market. The other option is bring down costs for, so that we can afford to build smaller, cheaper homes. But that seems like a bigger lift than at the very least just kind of letting us continue building the homes we've been building. Another sort of comment was that there's no real evidence that old homes or that new homes are less dangerous than old homes. Then I guess I'm confused, even aside from sort of Paul's comments, which I think he brought the fact that the facts say that new homes are significantly more fire safe. Why are we paying for all of these additional safety requirements if new homes aren't significantly more safe? We've added a lot of requirements since the 80s when, both 70% of our homes were built in the 80s or before. We have a bunch more requirements for safety. So if they're not doing something, then maybe we should get rid of them. But I think they are doing something. And I think our new homes are a lot more safe. And so I think that what's not being presented from the administration is how many fewer homes get built, how many more people are unsafe for the variety of reasons associated with old homes in worse repair. Seatbelts are pretty nominal cost relative to the cost of a car. Sprinklering a house is not comparable to a seatbelt. When you raise the cost for new construction, you're impacting the whole housing market, and this would raise the cost on new construction. And whether or not, we've not been getting responses. One of our members sent a pretty detailed email more than a week ago to the building official and Chris Schutte asking about some specific projects in the recent past that are under development and sort of potential projects that will be coming online as soon as next year. And it's just not been responded to about, where these sprinkler requirements would be applied and, sort of retrospectively, if we passed this law, would they be applied to the stuff that we're building right now? And we haven't been getting responses to that. So I've learned a lot in this committee meeting, and I hope you guys continue to dig into this issue. This is a major cost increase, and that's bad for Anchorage.
All right, thanks, Drew. Okay, in the text, Ms. Allard wrote, will the extra dollars spent to build in-home sprinkler systems save the muni funds? Does that mean we can then cut dollars at AFD? Mr. Constant, you have a question?
Yeah, no, I just want to respond. I'm going to be in the queue that Mr. Cason, I was misrepresented in my comments by your comments, and I reject that. And the misrepresentation was that you suggested that I asserted that new homes are not more safe. What I said specifically was the record is not before us that demonstrates that, and so we need to have that record before us in order to assume that that's a fact. So all of your values that you presented may in fact be true, but just because you said it doesn't make it so. And so my perspective is it is wise for us to have the records before us that demonstrate the facts as opposed to the opinions of lobbyists. So that, for me, was the assertion I was making.
And thank you for the clarification. I apologize for misrepresenting your sentiments. I thought that I had heard someone say that there's no particular evidence, and I don't think that I thought it was you even. I think that I thought someone from the fire department had said there's not a lot of particular evidence that says new homes are significantly safer.
Okay. All right, thanks. So anyone else on the phone would like to speak?
Yes, please.
Chuck Holman.
Okay, go ahead.
Yes, please.
I'm a builder.
Okay, what's your name?
Chuck Holman, H-O-M-A-N. Been a builder in Anchorage since 1978. And all this discussion has been about new construction. But the code actually says buildings or portions of buildings hereafter constructed. I do a lot of additions, and much of downtown Eagle River is unsprinklered. There's portions of areas that are just south of the park strip, like G Street, that are longer than 600 feet from a fire hydrant. There's portions of Westchester Lagoon. Any of these homeowners that want to build a bedroom addition will have to sprinkler the addition and put in a water supply system. So we're talking, all the discussion is about new construction in rural areas, yet vast portions of just the core areas of downtown Eagle River have no water supply system. And basically, if somebody wants to do 100,000 addition, they're going to spend $25,000 additional, plus the square footage that the water tank takes up to build it. So this is much greater than the rural areas that the code is, the fire marshal there is addressing. This affects all the residents of Anchorage, and I think there needs to be more discussion on that point, and I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Okay, great point. Thank you. More public. I see Andre Spinelli would like to speak. Go ahead. We're right up against our deadline. We got about 2 minutes.
Yes, my name is Niall Williams. I represent 1776 Alaska. I would like to first point out to the body, Alaska State Constitution, Article 1, Section 6, Assembly/petition. The right of the people to peacefully assemble and to petition the government shall never be abridged. It does not say that in times of COVID, it can be abridged. It says shall never be abridged. Secondly, I would like to point to same Article 1, Section 14, searches and seizures. That protects the right of the people against searches and seizures. This incidence of sprinkler systems is nothing more than an unlawful search and seizure that will be executed by the Anchorage Fire Department and the municipality to take people's homes away from them, and also to gin up the cost of building homes, to cause people to be in violation for living in older homes. This is completely unacceptable. We, the people, do not stand for it. No regulations of any kind of sprinkler system should be made. That's a violation of the Constitution. That's a violation of our rights to seek out and make our property the way we wish. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Andre, do you want to go look at the split?
Yeah, can you hear me? It's Andre.
Mr. Chair, I would move to extend for 5 more minutes. Andre's been very patient, and I want to make sure he has enough time to talk.
Okay, that's fine. Second on that? Any opposition? Let's go 6 minutes. Can we do 6 so we get 2 speakers?
Yes.
Okay. Go ahead, Andre.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I just want to talk on a couple things that I think might be, it kind of gets complicated and confusing. So when you're building a single family home, whether it be in the Anchorage Bowl or say outside the Anchorage Bowl, Eagle River, Girdwood, Chuyak, wherever it may be, Bear Valley, the home is reviewed under the International Residential Code, and that's the Fire and Life Safety Code that a single family home gets reviewed under. And then it gets a Title 21 review, that's our land use review. In the city of Anchorage, there's two options. You have the municipality can do the IRC review, the fire and life safety, or you can use the third party option, which allows for a qualified individual. When you're doing it in a land use area, typically a builder will hire a private inspector to do the IRC review. And so part of the confusion of, oh, these things have been in the IFC, the International Fire Code, since 2012, but have not been necessarily applied or have been ignored, is because single family homes don't typically get a review under the IFC. In Anchorage, over the last few years, we've had some sort of hybrid, and I don't quite understand how the municipality has started applying the IFC. But basically, a while back, when I'm building a house on the hillside, and if the driveway is more than 150 feet from the road, zoning has then started sending that to fire to look at, and then fire applies a section of the IFC to my building and requires me to build a fire turnaround on the plot plan, so that a fire truck, if it has to drive more than 150 feet, it requires a turnaround for that fire truck. So even though the IFC may or may not apply to single family homes, we've kind of been applying parts of the IFC to single family homes, and it's confused me. And it was a surprise when it first started popping up, and it popped up sporadically. It's become far more consistent now. And so when I saw this thing about the sprinkler systems come in, it's like, yeah, my single family homes don't go through a review of the IFC, but sometimes they get kicked to the IFC for certain reasons. And if all of a sudden we're going to start kicking these homes into the IFC and they're going to start applying this, then I want to know, because I'm writing contracts right now for homes that will be built under this code, and I haven't got a clear answer on whether those homes are going to need to have a sprinkler installed or not. And that's kind of, I guess I just wanted to kind of tell everybody how the code's applied, and there's a gray area whether the IFC actually applies to single family homes or not, and clarifying that would be the first thing. Does the IFC apply to new single-family homes built? Because when you're doing a plat, it's very clear. You get a fire review. When I'm platting a new subdivision, I get a fire review, and the fire department applies the IFC to the review of that plat. And so then plat notes will be put on homes that's on the subdivision that says homes in this subdivision, for example, will. It's very clear. You get a fire review. Get a fire review, and the fire department applies the IFC to the review of that plat. And so then plat notes will be put on homes that's on the subdivision that says homes in this subdivision, for example, will have sprinkler systems. And so, I guess I don't support sprinkler systems personally, but I'm kind of just going to let you guys decide on that. I just want clarity on what can expect to be required of me.
All right. Thank you. Okay. I don't know if we have time for an answer at this moment. Is there anyone else in the public who'd like to speak?
Hello? Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead. Is that Mr. Haberman?
Yeah, thank you. I'll be
go ahead, sir.
brief. Okay, it's been a very interesting meeting, okay? But I'd like to footnote the comments of Michelson earlier in reference to they had 3 public hearings and so forth and spread apart. Now, you need to bring those documents out there to the public and the assembly, and with all due respect, accepting attorneys from the city is saying that there's no problem, the city isn't complying. I've witnessed years of city and assembly not complying with certain laws, but here's the discussion is being brought out a state law and how you're handling this particular subject for the assembly meeting for the public hearing. That documents need to be brought out. Candy made reference to it to some degree. It's confusing to exactly what's what. Then those written documents need to be really brought out. And by the way, My email address is eugene@mtaonline.net. I would appreciate anyone to send me those documents. I would really strongly like to review them. But the thing is, a word of caution too is there's other elements that were brought out, other words were brought out that reference to other costs and water supplies and all that. This is another example of here there's other issues, and I would encourage you not to fast track the process on this and to get a real grip of what really this involves. Thank you very much, and I wish you all the best.
All right, thank you for that. So I think we need to end the meeting now, but for people listening, there is a public hearing scheduled for Tuesday. And of course, you can always email us and call the assembly members to, provide us with information. All right, anything else? We ready to adjourn, folks? Can we extend? Oh, Jamie's like to extend?
Oh.
No, I just wanted to I put my number in the chat box, John, just in case people needed to reach out. Thank you. I think we're good. I'm good.
Okay. Is that a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
All right, thanks.
Second.
All right, good discussion, everyone. Thank you.